This story will take you through what it truly meant to build a pyramid in ancient times. Every rock hauled, every order shouted, every drop of sweat spilled under the Egyptian sun. We'll explore the long-forgotten details that made the construction nearly impossible, from supply problems and engineering nightmares to the suffering of workers and slaves. So get comfortable, lie back, and listen closely. Let this slow, steady narrative help ease you into rest. And please, if you're still awake later, watch until the end, and write in the comments how you're feeling. Every story has a quiet side. This one is heavy with heat, dust, and stone. Let us begin. In the shadowy twilight before dawn, the banks of the Nile slowly stirred with life. The coolness of the night still clung to the sand as low-voiced commands rippled through the camp. Fires burned low, and sleep had already been interrupted by the heavy bellows of taskmasters. The year is roughly 2600 BCE, in the 4th dynasty of Egypt, during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. The pyramid that would later be known as the Great Pyramid of Giza had only begun its early stages of construction. The air was thick with dust, and thousands of bodies slowly moved into place. Stone haulers, copper tool makers, bakers, rope spinners, and men who would carry water through the sun-beaten tracks. Despite the myth of slaves toiling endlessly under the lash, much of the pyramid was constructed by seasonal laborers, ordinary Egyptian peasants, who were conscripted when the flooding of the Nile made farming impossible. These workers weren't necessarily enslaved, but their labor was not truly voluntary. They were fed and housed in modest workers' villages and spent months away from home and family. Though they were honored for serving the divine pharaoh, the work was ceaseless, grueling, and extremely dangerous. Before the first block could be laid, the site itself had to be prepared. The bedrock of the Giza Plateau had to be leveled with extraordinary precision. This wasn't done with modern instruments. No lasers, no GPS, no cement mixers. Instead, wooden measuring rods, copper chisels, plumb bobs, and rudimentary leveling. Tools like water-filled trenches were used to create a flat foundation over acres of uneven land. Just this preparation took years, as every bump in the terrain had to be smoothed, and every patch of unstable ground had to be cleared. Quarrying the stone was another ordeal. Limestone was quarried nearby, but the massive granite blocks used in the inner chambers were brought from Aswan, over 800 kilometers to the south. This granite, heavier and harder than limestone, was extracted with pounding balls of dolerite, a heavy volcanic rock. A team of men, for hours on end, would hammer the stone surface to make deep grooves. Then, wooden wedges were inserted and soaked with water. As the wood expanded, it cracked the rock, which could then be pried loose. These blocks, often weighing over 50 tons, had to be dragged to the riverbank, floated down the Nile, and then transported to the pyramid site overland, using sledges and lubricated tracks of clay or water. The logistics alone were staggering. Food had to be brought daily: bread, beer, onions, lentils, fish for tens of thousands of workers. Pottery had to be produced in vast quantities for cooking and storage. Tools made of copper and expensive and relatively soft metal had to be repaired constantly, worn down by the relentless friction against limestone. Rope, needed for hauling and lifting, had to be twisted and retwisted, crafted from papyrus, palm fiber, or flax. The heat was unrelenting. By midday, the sun burned down on the laborers, who wore little more than loincloths and headcloths to protect against the rays. Skin blistered, hands cracked, and feet bled. There was no true shade on the worksite, just canvas tents for brief moments of rest. Sandstorms would sometimes halt construction, blinding the men and burying half-finished sections in choking dunes. Still, the overseers barked commands, keeping time with clappers and chants, driving the pace forward. The stone blocks had to be shaped and placed with care. They were hauled on sledges over ramps built of mud brick, limestone chippings, and clay. These ramps had to be maintained, constantly repaired as they crumbled, extended higher as the pyramid rose, and expanded sideways to allow turning room. Some ramps were straight and massive. Others spiraled around the structure. No definitive evidence has survived to confirm the exact system, and historians still debate the exact techniques. But we know that the ramps alone may have taken more material and time to construct than parts of the pyramid itself, and they were later dismantled and disappeared into the landscape. Positioning each stone was an exercise in precision and agony. Ropes creaked under strain. Rollers jammed. Men shouted in unison to shift the block. When it was finally in place, masons would begin the slow process of aligning it with the others, scraping, adjusting, shaving small amounts off to achieve a tight fit. The aim was not just structure, but symmetry. Each block had to sit cleanly, in line, for stability and for beauty. Some blocks show signs of being adjusted multiple times, the original placement marked and corrected. The work continued without respite. Death was not uncommon. Bones recovered from workers' cemeteries show signs of arthritis, overuse injuries, broken limbs, and crushed bones. Infections from wounds and heat stroke were frequent. Burial in a workers' cemetery was a small mark of honor. Those who died building the pyramid were sometimes buried with jars of beer and bread, a token of appreciation for their service to the king. And all of this effort, years of it, from leveling the bedrock to shaping and stacking hundreds of thousands of limestone blocks, was undertaken to construct just the base of the pyramid. The higher the pyramid rose, the harder the labor became. Longer ramps, more lifting, and an increasing risk of collapse. Each tier required a greater degree of coordination and planning. Mistakes were difficult to fix and could not be hidden. Projects spanned decades. Generations of workers aged and died in the shadow of the growing pyramid. Their efforts were not celebrated in the way modern engineers are recognized. No names were carved into marble. No records of their lives survive. Only broken tools, faded footprints in mud brick, and the occasional scratched message left on a stone. They called themselves the drunkards of Menkaure, or the friends of Khufu, suggesting camaraderie among teams, but also hinting at the human struggle underneath the divine order. And when the pyramid was finally finished, gleaming white with its polished casing stones reflecting the desert sun, the workers were sent home. Many would return again for the next project, a new pyramid, a new pharaoh, a new ordeal. The myth of easy construction is a fantasy. These were not monuments conjured overnight by divine will. They were the slow, painful, exhausting result of human determination repeated every day under the burden of impossible expectations. And though they have endured for millennia, their builders have been forgotten in the dust. The pyramid is a tomb, yes, but also a silent witness to labor beyond imagination. The sun had risen high by mid-morning, and the noise of the site grew steadily louder. Rhythmic chants of laborers echoed off stone surfaces, mixing with the calls of overseers and the distant bleating of packed animals. Despite the apparent chaos, the construction of the pyramid was not a random effort. It was an enormous logistical machine, overseen by a carefully structured hierarchy. At the top sat royal architects and engineers appointed directly by the pharaohman, who bore the responsibility of turning divine ambition into a lasting monument. They were educated in geometry, astronomy, and the religious symbolism that defined every angle and line. But they rarely touched the stones themselves. Instead, they gave orders that rippled down through layers of foremen and team leaders, reaching the sweating backs of those who bore the true weight of the project. Layers of organization were essential. Without them, nothing would have moved. Workers were divided into groups, sometimes referred to as files or gangs, each responsible for a specific task. One group hauled stone, another shaped blocks, another built the ramps. Some prepared food, others brought water. Each gang could consist of several dozen men, and many were given nicknames to build morale. The vigorous ones, the enduring ones, or even humorous ones like the Friends of the Pyramid. They carved these names onto blocks as they went, leaving a faint signature of their toil, though few today would know what those faint scratches once meant. But even this organization could not eliminate the overwhelming strain. The supply demands alone were enough to stall progress for weeks if mismanaged. Consider the copper tools used for carving limestone and granite. Copper was not only rare but prone to deformation. A chisel would blunt quickly against stone, but had to be returned to a forge, heated, hammered, cooled, and reshaped before it could be used again. Thousands of tools were needed, and blacksmiths worked constantly to keep the flow steady. If a chisel broke mid-carving and no replacement was on hand, a team could stand idle for hours. Water was perhaps the most precious supply. Each man required gallons per day, especially under the blazing Egyptian sun. Wells near the pyramid site were limited, and water was also carried from the Nile in heavy ceramic jars, loaded onto donkeys or carried on shoulders. These water bearers made their rounds under the same sun, climbing the ramps, slipping on stone, and pouring water not just for drinking but for wetting the tracks over which sledges moved. Friction was a constant enemy. A dry sledge would stop dead under its load, but with enough water, sand could be transformed into a kind of slick surface, reducing resistance enough for men to push. And then there was food, another enormous challenge. Thousands of men had to be fed 3 times daily. Bread was baked in long open pits. Yeast, water, flour, and salt were mixed by hand. The dough patted flat and laid into clay ovens. Fish were salted and dried. Onions were chopped by the hundreds. Beans, lentils, and barley were staples, and large storage houses held the supplies that caravans brought in from surrounding regions. At mealtimes, workers crowded into shaded areas or low structures near the worksite, resting on mats and eating in silence or low conversation. The break was brief, and most men returned to work before their limbs could fully recover. Injury was part of the daily rhythm. A slip on a ramp, a rope burn, a crushed finger, or a falling stone, none of these were uncommon. There were no hospitals, no sterile environments, no anesthetics. Simple wounds could become infected within hours. Cuts were wrapped in linen with herbal salves, honey, resin, garlic, but even these natural remedies had limits. For more serious injuries, the options were few. Some injured men were sent home if they could still walk. Others stayed in the workers' village, hoping for recovery, or for the mercy of death. The evidence we have from ancient skeletons shows fractured limbs that healed poorly, spines compressed by years of weight-bearing, and hips worn down by endless climbing. For all this effort, progress on the pyramid was incredibly slow. Estimates suggest that at the peak of construction, a new block might have been placed every few minutes, but this pace was not sustainable year-round. During the flood season, laborers were available in greater numbers, but when the Nile receded, many had to return to their fields to tend crops. The result was a rhythm-intense periods of labor followed by quieter months. Some years saw rapid progress. Others dragged with minimal change. The sheer scale of the pyramid made every task seem both urgent and futile. Hundreds of thousands of blocks, each weighing 2 to 15 tons, had to be placed with millimeter precision. The difference between success and collapse was the angle of a single slope or the gap between two stones. The core of the pyramid was often rougher than the polished outer shell. Large limestone blocks were stacked in layered rows, interlocked to spread weight evenly. But the outer casing, now mostly gone, was made of finer white limestone brought from distant quarries. These stones were polished to a shine, and laid so tightly that not even a knife blade could pass between them. Placing these finishing stones was a labor of months. Each had to be fitted without gaps, its surface smoothed until it reflected the sun like polished ivory. In the height of summer, the glare could be blinding. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramps grew steeper. Some scholars suggest a straight ramp leading out from the front, while others propose a spiral ramp encircling the pyramid. In either case, the ramps were made of mud brick and stone chips, constantly reinforced to bear the weight of the stones and the men. As the structure rose, the journey for each block became longer and more dangerous. The higher one climbed, the more risk there was of falling, of sledges tipping over, or of stones slipping loose and crashing downward. Casualties increased, and yet the work continued. Meanwhile, in the royal court, the pharaoh's advisors monitored the construction from afar. They received reports carried by scribes on the progress of each phase, the rate of stone deliveries, the number of laborers injured or dismissed, and the quantities of bread and beer consumed. Every detail mattered. The pyramid was not just a tomb. It was a sacred project tied to the eternal life of the king. Its failure would be a spiritual catastrophe, not just a logistical one. Within the walls of the workers' village, life was harsh but structured. The workers lived in long stone dormitories, slept on reed mats, and ate communally. They sang together at night, told stories by the fire, and carved graffiti into walls and stones to leave their mark. These marks, crudely scratched figures, names and symbols remain today, faint whispers of those whose names were never written in gold. Some depicted oxen, gods, or ships. Others simply recorded that Mira was here, or that the gang of the Friends of Khufu had completed a section. These markings, overlooked for centuries, are among the only voices of the people who built the pyramids. What they felt, whether pride, exhaustion, resentment, or devotion, we cannot know. Some likely believed they were serving the gods, that their work would bring them favor in the afterlife. Others may have been motivated by duty, community, or the simple promise of food and shelter. But all of them shared in the same burden, an unrelenting cycle of sweat and stone, repeated day after day under the burning sky. And still the pyramid climbed, inch by inch, toward a summit that few would ever live to see. The months turned quietly across the desert, with little to show for the passage of time, except for the ever-growing height of the stone colossus. Work began before sunrise and ended only when the sun dipped again beyond the far edge of the desert horizon, casting long shadows across the uneven ground. Dust hung in the air, clinging to every surface, turning workers' sweat into a fine layer of grime that coated their skin. Despite the toil, the rhythm of life at the pyramid site followed an unchanging pattern, each day mirroring the last, each week indistinct from the one before. Time passed slowly, measured not in hours, but in blocks placed, ramps extended, and injuries endured. The building of a pyramid was not a project with clear signs of progress. From the ground, workers saw little of what they were accomplishing. They did not have the perspective to admire the shape forming beneath their feet. Most could not see the structure as a whole. They were too close, too buried in the detail of the task in front of them, smoothing a block, mixing mortar, dragging a sledge, patching a ramp. It was only the architects and overseers, perched on higher ground or viewing from afar, who understood the shape that was forming. For the common laborer, it was a life consumed by repetition, with little understanding of when the end might come, or if it would come in their lifetime. One of the greatest challenges was managing the weight of the pyramid as it grew. The architects had to calculate how much pressure each layer of stone would exert on those below. A small miscalculation early in construction could result in collapse years later. To avoid this, inner passageways and chambers were constructed with sloped ceilings and corbelled roofs techniques that distributed weight more evenly. These solutions were not based on modern physics, but on centuries of trial, error, and experience. The builders had no written engineering manuals. They relied on the knowledge passed down from master to apprentice, generation to generation, from the builders of the step pyramid to the latest royal commission. The Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of them all, was not simply a stack of stones. It was a carefully designed structure with hidden chambers, angled corridors, and mysterious voids. The Grand Gallery, with its high vaulted ceiling, was an architectural wonder for its time. But creating these internal spaces within a growing mountain of stone was unimaginably difficult. Workers had to hollow out passages with precise dimensions, reinforce ceilings with massive granite beams, and maintain perfect angles so that each corridor pointed to specific stars or sacred directions. This level of planning required complete coordination between the team shaping the inner sanctum and the teams adding layer after layer to the outer structure. As the pyramid rose higher, so too did the risks. Stones placed on the upper tiers had to be lifted along increasingly steep ramps. Some blocks had to be dragged up more than 100 meters above ground level. Without cranes or pulleys, this meant human strength alone was relied upon, aided by wooden sledges, ropes, and lubricated tracks. To lift a single large block took dozens of men, pulling in unison while others steadied the load, guided the sledges, and shouted to keep time. The physical effort required to raise even one block to such a height was immense. Dozens of similar lifts were performed each day for years, and with each lift came the danger of collapse. A single block slipping from its sled could careen down the ramp, crushing anyone in its path. These were not rare events. Injuries from falling stones were severe and often fatal. The noise of such an accident would echo across the site. Deep, resonant crash followed by silence. Those nearby would pause, look toward the sound, and then quietly return to their work. There was no ceremony for the dead beyond a simple burial near the workers' village. Life on the pyramid site was too urgent, too consuming, to stop for mourning. Despite the hardships, some evidence suggests that the laborers developed a strong sense of community. Within the workers' village, life was structured and somewhat stable. Stone houses with low ceilings shielded families from the worst of the desert heat. Ovens baked bread in batches, and large jars held dates, beer, and lentils. Workers sang songs and recited stories of gods and heroes during evening rest. Children played among the alleys, chasing each other through the narrow stone lanes, and wives of the laborers sometimes assisted in food preparation or weaving linen. Life continued alongside the work, grounded in a rhythm older than the pyramids themselves. Religious belief also played a role in shaping the workers' endurance. Many believed that building the pyramid was a sacred duty and act of service to the divine pharaoh who would become a god in death. Offerings were made to local deities. Small shrines were placed near the construction site, with incense burned and prayers whispered at the beginning of each work cycle. The builders carved images of the gods into stone fragments, left behind among discarded chips and sand. These were not official religious icons, but personal devotion's silent reminders that their suffering had meaning beyond the physical. And still, the pyramid grew. From a distance, it must have appeared as though the desert itself was rising. The pale limestone caught the sun, shimmering against the blue sky, while thousands of figures toiled below, ants beneath a mountain. The sight would have awed travelers and traders arriving from far-off lands, who saw not the labor, but only the result, a miracle of stone, standing against the shifting sands. For the pharaoh, the pyramid was not merely a monument. It was a vessel for eternity. Inside its sealed chambers, he would be laid to rest, surrounded by treasures, protected by spells and guardians carved into the walls. The entire structure was a portal, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the gods. Its design was aligned with celestial bodies, pointing to the stars that represented the afterlife. The precision of the layout, the alignment of the base, the orientation of the entrance, all of it was tied to a cosmic order the Egyptians called Ma'at, the principle of harmony, balance, and divine truth. To maintain this cosmic order required sacrifice, not only the symbolic sacrifice of goods and offerings, but the very real sacrifice of labor, sweat, and time. Tens of thousands of people gave their strength to the project, not for personal gain, but to serve the eternal soul of the king. And they did so without rest, under the watchful eye of the overseers, under the silent stars, under the ever-burning sun. This was no miracle. It was not the work of gods or machines. It was the slow and painful creation of something meant to last forever, built by hands that would turn to dust long before the final stone was set. The pyramid, now a jagged slope of white stone climbing ever upward, began to dominate the landscape like a man-made mountain. From the edge of the Giza plateau, the Nile could be seen in the distance, its slow waters winding through fields and villages. But for the workers tethered to the colossal project, that view was distant and unattainable. Their lives were lived within the dust-covered perimeter of the construction site, where their days bled into each other in a constant, muted rhythm. Each morning brought with it the familiar sounds, the low grunt of animals, the barked orders of overseers, the scrape of stone against sledges, the echoing taps of hammer against chisel. There were no shortcuts to be taken. Each stone still had to be cut by hand. The masons, whose work began long before the block ever reached the pyramid, toiled under brutal conditions in quarries where the sun struck the ground like a hammer and the air shimmered with heat. Limestone, the most common material used in the outer structure, could be shaped with copper tools. But for the granite required for internal supports, the job was more punishing. Granite was not carved so much as pulverized. Teams would hammer the surface of the stone with dolerite pounders, round stones wielded with repetition and patience, not finesse. This battering would continue hour after hour, day after day, until the desired shape emerged. Once freed, the block would be maneuvered onto a sled, tied tightly with ropes of palm fiber or flax, and then slowly dragged to the river. The movement was glacial, each step forward hard-won. At the riverbank, the stone awaited transport by barge. Wooden boats, flat-bottomed and wide, were loaded with their heavy cargo, often riding so low in the water that the waves nearly spilled over their sides. The Nile's current was both a blessing and a danger, swift enough to speed travel northward toward the pyramid site, but unpredictable and prone to seasonal shifts that could beach or sink a vessel. Timing mattered. If a shipment missed the annual flood, it might be delayed for weeks. At Giza, the stone was offloaded and once again dragged, this time uphill. The closer one moved to the pyramid, the more crowded the landscape became. There were piles of tools, heaps of rubble, rows of shelters, and teams of workers in constant motion. Foremen stood near the base of the ramps, directing teams as they strained against ropes, pushing and pulling in unison. They used chants, whistles, and hand gestures to coordinate movement, knowing that a single misstep could lead to injury or worse. The ramps themselves were slippery, worn down by countless trips, patched constantly with new layers of mud brick and stone chips, though every surface at the worksite bore signs of passage. The smooth stones of the lower tiers were dulled from thousands of hands brushing against them. Narrow stairways carved into temporary support walls bore the footprints of laborers, pressed deep into the clay. The very air seemed thick with the labor of the past, as though it had absorbed the sighs and gasps of every man who had strained beneath the weight of the pharaoh's ambition. In the higher sections of the pyramid, work took on a more precarious nature. The stones were placed with increasing care, and space to maneuver became limited. The wind was stronger here, unobstructed, and the sun unrelenting. Workers had to navigate narrow walkways, often carrying tools or smaller stones, always aware of the deadly drop just to the side. There were no safety rails. A moment of dizziness, a loose rock, or an unexpected shift in balance could mean a fall to certain death. These accidents, though rarely recorded, must have been common. There was no ceremony for these men. Their absence was marked only by the quiet redistribution of duties among their peers. To keep up the pace of construction, schedules were rigid. Days began at first light, and breaks were short. The midday meal might consist of bread soaked in beer, onions, or dried fish, simple fare to sustain weary bodies. Rest came in the evening, but it was often brief and broken. Muscles ached, sleep was shallow, and the nights were filled with the rustling of straw mats, the coughing of the injured, and the murmurs of homesickness. Workers spoke of family, of the fields back in their villages, of gods and spirits, and of the afterlife they were told would reward them for their service. For some, there may have been a sense of pride. Few men in Egypt could say they had worked on a royal pyramid. Their labor, though hard, was tied to eternity. Others saw it differently, as an obligation, something endured for rations, shelter, and the promise of eventual release. Not all laborers were equal. Some were craftsmen, stonecutters, toolmakers, and scribes, who held higher status and were given better accommodations. Others were common laborers, their value measured in the strength of their backs and the endurance of their limbs. And still others were little more than debt-bound workers, forced into the project to pay off what they owed, with no clear path to freedom. The workers' village was a microcosm of Egyptian society, ordered, hierarchical, and deeply spiritual. Scribes recorded everything: deliveries, injuries, attendance, and consumption of food. These records were kept on papyrus or carved into structure shards of pottery reused as makeshift documents. Some survive today, faded and fragmented, telling of missing laborers, spoiled grain, or stolen tools. They paint a picture not of mythic grandeur, but of human error and mundane struggle. Even in the shadow of one of history's greatest monuments, bureaucracy was king. As the uppermost layers of the pyramid began to take shape, the pace of work slowed even more. Each stone had to be lifted farther, and the precision required increased. The apex of the pyramid, known as the pyramidion, was perhaps the most difficult element of all. A single block, shaped to a point, possibly gilded or capped with gold. It had to be placed perfectly to complete the form. We do not know exactly how this final step was taken. The ramps may have been reconfigured. Scaffolding may have been used, or it may have been placed during an early stage of construction and gradually built around. However it happened, it marked the culmination of decades of effort of planning, transporting, lifting, and setting stones under the unforgiving desert sky. And then, when the final stone was in place, the real work began again, because much of what we now see as a rough, weathered surface was once polished to near perfection. The smooth casing stones, fitted so closely together they barely allowed passage to air, gave the pyramid a brilliant finish. Shining white limestone caught the light of the sun, reflecting its rays so powerfully that the pyramid could be seen from miles away. This reflective surface has mostly eroded or been removed over millennia, but in its original state, the pyramid would have appeared not as a dusty ruin, but as a glowing beacon, impossibly smooth, geometric and blinding in its beauty. The pyramid was finished, but the cost had been enormous. Not in gold or silver, but in time, in energy, in broken bodies and lost names. The pharaoh would have his eternal resting place, and the gods would be appeased. But for the men who had built it, life returned to what it had always been. The tools were packed away, the ramps dismantled, the camps emptied, and slowly the desert reclaimed what had once been a sea of human motion. Only the pyramid remained, unmoving, silent, and indifferent. The pyramid now stood completed, its massive silhouette rising out of the golden desert like a monument to the sky itself. For those who witnessed its final form in antiquity, it must have seemed eternal, invulnerable, something placed on earth by the gods rather than built by men. And yet, though the structure stood silent and proud, it echoed still with the effort of every moment that had gone into its creation. Thousands of hands, hundreds of thousands of days, millions of careful decisions, each buried in stone, invisible. Beneath the surface, part of a human story that would never be fully told. The workers returned home in small groups. Some had only traveled a few miles to the site, while others had come from villages far down the Nile. They carried little with them, perhaps a small pouch of bread, a tool gifted by a foreman, or a story of hardship repeated around evening. Fires. Many had joined the workforce as young men and returned as elders, their bodies worn down from years of lifting, dragging, chiseling, and marching in dust. Some would go back to farming the Nile's fertile banks. Others would be called again for future monuments. But for a brief moment, they were free from the commands of stone and sundot in the silence that followed the completion. The pyramid site transformed. What had once been a place of deafening labor now grew quiet. The ramps, which had taken years to build, were slowly dismantled, their bricks reused elsewhere. The workers' village was abandoned, its ovens cold, its paths empty, and its walls crumbling back into dust. Scribes packed their papyrus scrolls and ledgers, taking with them the final tallies of stone blocks, daily rations, and human losses. Only the guards remained silent figures watching over the sealed tomb, ensuring that the treasures inside would be untouched. Inside the pyramid, the king's body lay embalmed and wrapped in linen, sealed in a stone sarcophagus within the central chamber. The internal corridors had been blocked with enormous granite slabs, slid into place to confound future intruders. Rituals had been performed, offerings had been made. The walls around the burial chamber might have been painted or inscribed with sacred texts, spells, and prayers designed to guide the pharaoh into the afterlife. For the Egyptians, death was not an end, but a transition. The pyramid was not a final destination but a gateway, a mechanism by which the soul could ascend to the stars. But not long after its completion, the grandeur of the pyramid began to fade from daily life. Though it stood unchanging, the lives of those who built it moved on. The tools they once used rusted in storage. The routines they followed dissolved into the passing of seasons. Generations came and went. Children born during the construction now walked past the monument without the awe their parents once felt. The pyramid became part of the landscape, still mighty, but no longer immediate. And over time, even its builders were forgotten. Their names erased by centuries of wind and sand. the surrounding area shifted too. New structures were built nearby, smaller tombs for nobles and priests, offering chapels, and rows of mastabas. These structures formed a necropolis, a city of the dead, where rituals continued long after the workers had vanished. Priests were assigned to maintain the memory of the king, performing regular offerings at altars placed near the pyramid's base. Bread, beer, meat, and incense were laid before carved images of the pharaoh, who was now a god in the eyes of the people. These ceremonies, carried out with solemnity and care, helped maintain the cosmic balance that the pyramid was meant to secure. And still, the structure stood. Centuries passed. New kings rose and fell. Dynasties shifted. Foreign rulers came and went. The pyramids weathered it all. Their outer casing stones, once brilliant in the sunlight, slowly began to fall away. Earthquakes loosened their grip. Looters pried them free. Whole layers of smooth limestone were stripped and carried off to build mosques, palaces, and fortifications in nearby Cairo. By the time Greek historians arrived in Egypt in the first millennium BCE, the pyramids were already ancient. Herodotus, the so-called father of history, wrote about them with wonder but also with confusion, repeating myths and second-hand stories passed along by local guides who no longer remembered the details by the Roman period. The Pyramid of Khufu, known later as the Great Pyramid, was no longer viewed as a tomb, but as a curiosity. Its purpose was debated. Some thought it had been built as a granary, others as a beacon. Without knowledge of the language of the ancient builders, the meaning of the structure was lost. The hieroglyphs, sacred carvings that once told of kings and gods, became meaningless symbols. It would be many centuries before the Rosetta Stone unlocked their secrets, and longer still before archaeologists began to unearth the truth of how such monuments were built. But even when the historical facts returned, the myths persisted. The idea that the pyramids were built by slaves, a notion repeated by later cultures, endured for generations. Stories of magic, giants, and supernatural tools were attached to the structure. In the absence of clear records, imagination filled the void. Few people wanted to believe that such monumental architecture could be achieved by thousands of ordinary men, working together, year after year, in the blazing heat. The truth that it was the result of relentless human effort seemed almost too difficult to accept, and yet, there it stands. The Great Pyramid has endured more than 40 centuries. It was once the tallest man-made structure on Earth. It has witnessed the birth and fall of empires, the shifting of continents, the rise of new religions, and the changing of languages. It has been climbed, mapped, photographed, looted, measured, and marveled at, but it has never been fully understood, not by the ancient tourists who gazed at it in awe, nor by modern travelers who stand before it today, wondering how such a thing could exist. It is more than a tomb, more than a monument. It is a mirror of human persistence. Every stone is a record of a decision made, a task completed, a hardship endured. Not one was placed easily. Not one came without cost. And that, more than any treasure buried within, is the true story of the pyramid, the effort it took to create the impossible, and the silence that followed once it was done. The winds across the plateau never ceased. Long after the workers departed and the royal priests grew old in their temple duties, the desert reclaimed what it could. Sand crept over stone paths, swallowed the edges of the workers' village, and softened the once sharp outlines of the pyramid's base. The sun, always overhead, bleached the upper stones, while rare rains carved tiny channels through mortar joints. But still, the pyramid held firm. Its mass, its shape, its weight all continued to resist the slow grinding of time. Even as generations passed without adding so much as a single stone, the monument endured, silent and unchanged for the common people of later dynasties. The pyramid was no longer something they remembered being built. It had become something that simply existed. Stories filled the void left by lost knowledge. Some believed the pyramids were built by gods or beings of great power. Others believed the pharaohs had used divine wisdom, or that the stones had moved themselves. The real answer, that the structures were created by thousands of people hauling heavy stones day after day for decades, seemed too ordinary to satisfy the imagination. And so, fiction replaced memory. The surrounding area evolved. Small tombs continued to be constructed nearby, though few could match the scale or grandeur of Khufu's pyramid. These later tombs were lower, flatter, more accessible. Their inscriptions were longer, more detailed, reflecting a shift in burial traditions and religious belief. No longer was a pharaoh the sole focus of eternal life. Now nobles, officials, and wealthy citizens claimed a place in the afterlife, carving prayers into their tombs, filling chambers with statues, and leaving behind records of their deeds. But none of these later tombs could erase the shadow of the Great Pyramid. It loomed above all, vast and still, a reminder of a time when the entire state could be mobilized toward a single goal. Pilgrims came to see it. Foreign dignitaries marveled at its form. Even as new temples rose in Thebes and new capitals were built to the north, the Pyramid of Khufu remained as a relic of an age no one could replicate. Its smooth casing, once pristine and white, slowly fell away as thieves and builders harvested the stone for their own projects. Some of the blocks, once cut and polished with such effort, were carted away and mortared into city walls and mosques centuries later. Inside the pyramid, quiet reigned. The burial chamber remained sealed. The passageways, blocked with stone, kept out most intruders. But eventually, the secrets of the inner structure were disturbed. Tomb robbers, working in darkness and desperation, began digging through the pyramid's side, breaking through the original blocked entrance, crawling through corridors with lamps and crude tools. What they found is uncertain. Some believe the burial chamber had already been looted in antiquity. Others think it had been sealed before valuables were placed inside. Whatever the truth, the interior of the pyramid was no longer untouched. Centuries passed. The pyramid stood through invasions, civil wars, the rise of new religions, and the redrawing of maps. It saw the Roman legions march through Egypt, watched from afar as Cleopatra's court fell to foreign power. It stood in the background as the language of the people changed, as Greek mixed with Coptic, then later gave way to Arabic. It survived earthquakes and sandstorms. Though many of the surrounding buildings fell or vanished, the Great Pyramid remained, now weathered and broken at the edges, but still undeniably whole. When early modern travelers from Europe arrived in Egypt in the 17th and 18th centuries, the pyramid once again became a subject of fascination. Explorers, artists, and archaeologists climbed its weathered steps and speculated about its purpose. Some measured its sides and angles, believing it held mathematical secrets. Others theorized it encoded ancient wisdom or astronomical alignments too complex to have been accidental. Few, even then, truly grasped the scale of the human effort required to build it. They saw the final result, not the lifetimes that were given to make it stand. It was not until the 19th century that a more scientific approach began to uncover the details of how the pyramid had been constructed. Excavations revealed the remnants of workers' villages, complete with bakeries, granaries, and sleeping quarters. Skeletons were found, many with signs of healed injuries and arthritis, evidence of long years of hard labor. Inscriptions left by labor gangs on stone blocks identified teams, sometimes humorously, sometimes proudly. The drunkards of Menkaure, the friends of Khufu. These fragments of writing, left in forgotten corners, restored a small portion of the human voice lost for thousands of years. Even so, myths continued. Some claimed the pyramids were too perfect to have been built by primitive people. They looked for lost civilizations, hidden technologies, or extraterrestrial help. It was easier to imagine magic than to imagine that tens of thousands of ordinary men had worked in unbearable heat, year after year, with only basic tools and an unrelenting schedule. Yet every archaeological discovery pointed to the same conclusion: this was the work of people, not gods, labor, not sorcery, dust, sweat, and time, all layered one stone at a time. And the more researchers learned, the more they appreciated the genius and the simplicity. Wooden sledges sliding on wet sand, copper chisels hammered with persistence, rope hauled by rhythmic chanting, blocks shaped with patience and fitted with care. Nothing beyond the scope of human effort, but all arranged with foresight, discipline, and belief. Belief not only in the divine right of a ruler, but in the lasting value of work well done, even if no one would ever know the names of those who did it. And so, the pyramid endures not just as a pile of stone, or a burial chamber, or a mathematical riddle, but as a story etched in silence, a record of endurance, of patience, of a civilization's ability to imagine something greater than itself and to make it real, not in days, but in lifetimes. The Great Pyramid does not speak. It does not move. But in its stillness, it tells a story more profound than any inscription. A story that continues, block by block, into the present. The long shadow of the Great Pyramid reached not only across the land, but across the centuries, touching the minds of every generation that followed. Even when those who built it had turned to dust, their work remained visible. The shape of the pyramid, broad at the base, narrowing to a point, became more than an architectural form. It became a symbol, copied in temples, tombs, and sacred art, an echo of permanence in a world where everything else seemed to pass away. Even after the knowledge of its construction faded, the image of the pyramid held power. It represented the idea of stability, of eternity, of something greater than a single lifetime. And yet the reality of building it had been anything but eternal. It was a temporary chaos, a massive effort of coordination and logistics, bound together by thousands of living, breathing people who knew they would not see the end of what they helped build. For many of them, the pyramid was only a workplace, not a monument. They did not gaze up at its shining sides in awe, but instead looked forward to sleep, to a break in the heat, to a meal of bread and beer after hours of dragging stone. They worked not for glory, but because they had no choice, or because the structure promised them something. Food, safety, community, or a place in the divine order. To organize such a workforce was itself a monumental task. It is easy to imagine the blocks and ramps, the stones and tools, but less often do we imagine the system that held it all together. The food had to be grown, processed, and delivered. The water had to be fetched from wells or drawn from the Nile, sometimes carried in clay jars across miles of uneven terrain. The tools had to be forged, repaired, and redistributed. Even basic needs like shelter and clothing required effort. Linen had to be woven. Reed mats had to be laid out for sleep. In the background of the grand construction stood an even larger, quieter machine, the machine of human survival. And that machine was vulnerable. A drought could delay shipments. A plague could kill workers. A political change at court could stall the project for months. Everything depended on a fragile balance of nature, of politics, of social cooperation. The image of the pyramid today, so solid and permanent, hides the fact that at any moment during its creation, things could have unraveled. A missed harvest, a lost shipment of copper tools, an injury to a key foreman. The pyramid could have remained unfinished, a wide base slowly buried in sand, a forgotten attempt at greatness. That it was completed at all is not evidence of divine power, but of human endurance under pressure. The internal structure of the pyramid, though largely hidden, also tells a story of trial and error. It is not a single open space, but a series of chambers and passages, each one placed with care. The narrow entrance, once hidden by smooth casing stones, leads inward at an angle, descending into darkness. A low passage leads to a small unfinished chamber, the original burial plan, perhaps abandoned early in construction. Above this, higher in the pyramid's body, sits the so-called Queen's Chamber, a modest space whose purpose remains unclear. And still higher, deep within the structure's heart, lies the King's Chamber, made of enormous granite blocks, each weighing more than 50 tons, brought from quarries far to the south. Above the King's Chamber, architects placed 5 relieving chambers, horizontal spaces filled with stone slabs to distribute the crushing weight of the pyramid above. These chambers, invisible to the outside world, are an act of foresight and a sign of anxiety. Without them, the chamber might have collapsed under the weight of the millions of stones resting on top of it. The builders did not rely on faith. They prepared for pressure, for time, for failure. Their work was cautious, deliberate. These relieving chambers remained hidden for millennia, their existence unknown even to tomb robbers and early explorers. Only in recent centuries were they rediscovered by those who drilled, climbed, and crawled through the pyramid's narrow spaces in search of secrets. In the quiet of those spaces, the air is still and dry. Dust hangs undisturbed. The only sounds are those brought in by visitors' boots on stone, camera clicks, the quiet hush of whispered wonder. The walls are bare, for the Great Pyramid is unusual among royal tombs in having few if any inscriptions. Its walls speak through silence, not writing. Unlike the tombs of later kings in the Valley of the Kings, which were decorated with scenes of judgment and paradise, the Great Pyramid leaves much the imagination. Its power is not in imagery, but in scale. And yet, even in its simplicity, it humbles those who enter. To walk its narrow corridors, to stand in the chamber at its center, is to feel small in a way that few buildings can accomplish. The thick stone, the sheer mass above, the ancient smell of dry air and limestone, all contribute to a sense of something far older and deeper than modern time. Here, the present fades, and even the noisy world outside grows distant. What remains is stone, and the quiet knowledge that this place was made not for the living, but for something beyond an afterlife, a belief, an idea too vast to fully understand. Outside, the sun continues to rise and fall, just as it did for the workers who built it. The seasons still pass over the plateau. The winds still sweep through the broken stone of nearby tombs. Modern visitors come by the thousands, their footsteps brief and passing. But the pyramid stays. It is no longer smooth, no longer shining, no longer sealed, but it is still here. Its edges are worn, its upper stones pockmarked by time, its secrets slowly fading into the gaps of memory. But its shape, that unmistakable silhouette, remains against the sky. It is said that the Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. This precision is not an accident. It reflects a world in which time, space, and spirit were bound together. The builders did not simply construct upward. They aligned their work with the heavens, with the movements of stars and the rhythms of the earth. Each corner, each angle had meaning. Even today, the alignment is so precise that it puzzles engineers. How such accuracy was achieved without compasses or satellites remains unclear, but the evidence suggests a deep understanding of astronomy and observation tools of the ancient world, used with care and patience. And so, the pyramid rests. In death, but in waiting. Waiting for the next visitor. Waiting for the next question. Waiting for another gust of wind to sweep over its surface. Its stones may no longer echo with the sound of hammers or shouted chants, but their weight remains, holding the past in place, quiet and immense, beneath the eternal sun. As the centuries passed with the quiet steadiness of wind over sand, the Great Pyramid continued to watch the changing world from its place on the Giza Plateau. It stood as empires grew and collapsed, as languages rose and faded, as beliefs shifted, from gods with falcon heads to prophets and saints, and later to explorers with maps and compasses. Each age looked upon the pyramid with its own questions, its own doubts, and its own interpretations. But the structure offered no answers. It offered only presence, stone upon stone, unmoving. It had become something beyond its original purpose. Not just a tomb, not just a monument, but a mirror in which each age saw itself. The desert around. It also changed, slowly, gently, as if even the sands recognized the weight of time. The small structures built in the pyramid's shadow tombs for priests, family members, and officials began to crumble. Stones shifted. Walls collapsed. In some places, sand filled the gaps left by vanished roofs. Bones were exposed and then buried again. But the pyramid endured. Even without its shining casing stones, even with its weathered core blocks exposed to the elements, its form remained clear. A line reaching toward the sky. A triangle of permanence among the drifting dunes. And while many may imagine the site as remote, lonely, untouched, the truth is more layered. People never truly left the pyramid. In every era, someone came to it. In ancient times, it was the site of continued rituals. Priests recited spells, lit incense, left offerings. In Roman times, soldiers and scribes carved their names into its stones, graffiti left behind, as if to claim a connection with something eternal. In the Islamic Golden Age, scholars speculated about its origins. Some believed it held the wisdom of lost civilizations. Others imagined it as a place of refuge during ancient floods or great fires. It had become a canvas for wonder. As the medieval world gave way to the modern, new explorers arrived. They brought tools, notebooks, and questions sharpened by science. Rather than myth, they measured every edge. They examined every chamber. They debated its weight, its purpose, its construction methods. Some sought hidden passages. Others looked for treasure. But most were struck, as all before them had been, by the sheer impossibility of it. How such a thing could have been built so long ago, and how it could have lasted so long, when so much else had fallen away. In the 19th and 20th centuries. Archaeologists began to peel back the layers of time with care. They uncovered the remains of workers' settlements. They found beer jars, copper tools, small statues of gods tucked away in forgotten corners. The bones of oxen and fish, the soot of ancient ovens, the broken shards of water jars, all spoke of ordinary life. These findings slowly reshaped the story. No longer was the pyramid thought to be the work of slaves chained and beaten. The evidence pointed to skilled laborers, organized in teams, fed and housed, whose work was difficult but structured. Many may still have suffered. Many still may not have had a choice. But their story became more human, more real. One by one, the myths gave way to quieter truths. There were no hidden machines. No great secrets of anti-gravity. No mysterious force unknown to modern science. What remained was effort. Endless, coordinated, physical effort. and planning layer upon layer of logistical brilliance. From the quarrying of stone to the layout of internal corridors, from the alignment with the stars to the carving of air shafts within solid granite, the pyramid revealed itself as the result of minds focused not on fantasy, but on endurance. It had been a test of will and time, a monument to what could be done slowly, painfully, and without rest. Yet even today, questions linger. How were the heaviest blocks lifted so high? What tools were used to shape the hardest granite? Were the ramps straight or spiraled? Where is the pharaoh's treasure, if it ever existed? Each new generation returns to the pyramid not only with admiration, but with curiosity. Modern technology, radar, drones, 3D scans continues to probe the structure. In recent years, voids were detected within, possibly new chambers yet to be explored. But even now, much of the pyramid remains unknown. It guards its secrets with quiet stone and perfect stillness. Visitors continue to arrive, just as they always have. They come by bus, by car, sometimes even on foot, climbing the hill from the edges of Cairo, which now reaches the plateau's border. They stand beneath the towering face of the pyramid, their shadows small and uncertain in the desert light. Some take photographs. Some run their hands along the stone, feeling the coarse surface of a block carved 4,500 years ago. Some climb, though they are not supposed to. Some stare, unable to look away. And others simply sit, silently, unsure of what to say in the face of such quiet permanence. And at night, when the sun sinks behind the hills and the wind cools the sand, the pyramid remains. It glows faintly under the moonlight, casting shadows. Long and thin, the sounds of the city fall away, and only the desert speaks soft whispers through the rocks, the rustle of grit across ancient pathways, the occasional call of a bird flying far overhead. No one lives within the pyramid now. No one walks its corridors without permission. But something of the builders remains embedded in the structure itself, in the decisions they made, the corners they carved, the layers they aligned with the sky. It is a place that does not move, but continues to change everyone who comes near. For those who seek grandeur, it offers size. For those who seek mystery, it offers silence. For those who seek answers, it offers only the stones, placed one atop the next, without explanation, without boasting, without hurry. There is no noise, no ceremony, no inscription proclaiming victory. Only weight, only shape, only time. And so night falls again on the pyramid, just as it has every day since before the birth of language as we know it, since before the forging of iron, since before the wheel came to all lands. 1,000 empires have come and gone. 1,000 kings have ruled and been forgotten. But the pyramid remains, not unchanged but unfallen, not untouched but unbroken, a still point in a moving world, a breath held forever. Beneath the stillness of the pyramid, far below the uppermost tiers where sunlight fades to shadow, the foundation stones press firmly into the bedrock of the plateau. These massive blocks, some weighing more than 12 tons, were carefully leveled before anything else began. It is in these first stones that the structure found its true strength, not in its height, but in the consistency and accuracy of what lay at its base. Before the first layer was laid, surveyors and builders marked lines into the ground using cords, water levels, and the steady tracking of stars. The earth was scraped flat by hand. High points were chipped away with copper tools. Low points, filled with gravel and clay. Nothing could be trusted to chance, because even the smallest error at the base would magnify with each ascending layer. This hidden groundwork, now invisible to modern eyes, required as much effort as the towering upper stones that visitors photograph today. Men spent weeks, months even, adjusting the surface by tiny increments, checking with sight lines, adjusting again, leveling, smoothing, verifying. They worked in silence, heads bent close to the earth, aware that they were not building only upward. But outward stability required a wide, low spread of material beneath the visible layers. In this way, the Great Pyramid is not just a tower. It is a deeply embedded machine, rooted in the desert like a tree planted not in soil but in stone. Above ground, once the base was laid, the true repetition began. Each tier of blocks had to be moved into position not once, but twice, first at the quarry, and again at the site. The laborers tasked with transporting them faced an unchanging routine. Early each morning, they would rise from their mat-covered shelters, dress in simple linen if they had it, or go bare-skinned under the sun, and report to their group leaders. Groups were often organized by region or village, sometimes called by the names of their foremen, or by nicknames: the Strong Arms, the Falcon's Pullers, the North Wall Setters. These team names, scratched onto blocks or recorded on scraps of stone, offer rare glimpses into the community that made the pyramid possible. The ramps that climbed the pyramid's growing sides had to be constantly rebuilt. As the pyramid rose, so did the need for higher paths. These ramps made of mud brick, rubble, and limestone chippings were strengthened with wooden supports, wetted sand, and compacted layers. Workers dragged blocks using sledges lubricated with water to reduce friction. Some evidence suggests that as many as 30 or 40 men might be required to pull a single stone. Each movement was measured by rhythm step by step, with chants, shouted by overseers to keep the pace. It was not about speed. It was about not stopping. Along the sides of the ramps stood water carriers, sometimes barefoot boys, sometimes older men. Their job to keep the path slick and the ropes damp. Rope made from flax or palm fiber had to be replaced often. Frayed strands meant risk. If a rope snapped under pressure, the sledge could crash and men could be crushed. Injuries were common: feet mangled by rolling stone, hands split by rope, burns, backs broken from falls. That there was little space for rest. Injured men were sometimes patched up and returned to lighter tasks. Others simply disappeared, absorbed into the dust of the workforce, remembered only by the spaces they left behind. Midday meals were brief. Workers gathered in shaded hollows or behind tool sheds to eat onions, beans, lentils, flatbread. Jars of thick, yeasty beer were passed around, not the beer of modern taste, but a nutritious, porridge-like drink, rich in calories and often filled with floating bits of barley. The purpose was not enjoyment, but fuel. What mattered was survival. To the end of the shift, once the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the site, the chants ceased, the sledges were parked, and the ramps emptied. Workers returned to their shelters to rest, clean their wounds if they could, and sleep. But sleep came fitfully, always with the weight of another day waiting. Nearby, the workshops buzzed with a quieter energy. Stonecutters shaped the next days. Blocks, copper tools were resharpened over hot coals. Clay molds were formed for new parts. Scribes recorded deliveries, damage, and absences. In a corner of the camp, small temples offered a space for prayer-humble shrines where men might leave a piece of food, a strand of hair, or a whispered plea to a god of mercy. Even those who built a tomb for a god-king still feared the everyday spirits of illness, injury, and lost time. Protection was needed not only for the soul of a pharaoh, but for the hands and backs of those who carried his tombstone upward. The seasons affected everything. In the months when the Nile flooded, river transport was easier, and more labor could be brought from surrounding villages. But the wet months also made the desert air thick and heavy. In summer, The heat blistered the skin and cracked the lips of those working under an open sky. In winter, the wind cut through linen wrappings and filled eyes with grit. No season offered ease. Every month brought its own hardships. And always, the pyramid rose higher stone by stone. The layers narrowed. The steps became tighter. Eventually, only the most skilled workers were allowed on the upper tiers. Men trusted not to slip, not to misalign a block, not to panic in the thin space between earth and sky. The risk grew with every cubit of height. A misstep could mean a fall of hundreds of feet. And yet, they climbed, carrying tools and ropes, sometimes small statues of protective gods tied at their waist. In the quiet before dawn, one might have heard the whisper of sandals over stone, the grunting of men as they pushed one more block into place. Though above all of this hung a single question that most of them never asked out loud. Would it last? Would the work endure the storms, the sands, the centuries? Would it matter? They had no way to know. For the men at the base and even those at the peak, there was no assurance that their work would survive a decade, let alone 4.5 millennia. And yet, they continued, not because of prophecy, not because of glory, but because they were told to, because they had families to feed, because they lived in a world where obedience was survival, and because, perhaps quietly, in unspoken moments, they believed that what they were building might be more than just stone. And time, with its long shadow, has proven them right. As the pyramid's final stones were placed high above the desert floor, the workers who had toiled for decades began to sense the close of their immense task. The uppermost capstone, the pyramidion, was fashioned from a single piece of limestone, or granite, sometimes gilded to catch the sun's first light. Setting this stone was a delicate and dangerous endeavor. The final ascent required careful coordination, the steady hands of experienced climbers, and a deep sense of collective patience. Unlike the labor of hauling blocks, this moment demanded precision and reverence. It marked not only the physical completion, but also the spiritual crowning of the monument. Once the capstone was set, the smooth outer casing of white Tura limestone would have gleamed brilliantly under the Egyptian sun. This casing covered the stepped core, reflecting light across the desert and visible for miles. The pyramid, now fully formed, appeared like a shining beacon, a symbol of divine order, the pharaoh's eternal presence, and the unity of the land and sky. But this dazzling exterior was fragile. Over centuries, earthquakes, human quarrying, and erosion stripped the smooth stones away, leaving the rough core blocks exposed. Today, visitors see this raw skeleton of the pyramid, but once, it was meant to shine with a radiant perfection. The end of construction did not mean the end of work. Around the pyramid, temples and causeways were built to connect the tomb to the Nile and to the mortuary cults that would sustain the pharaoh's spirit. Priests performed daily rituals offering food, reciting prayers, and maintaining sacred spaces. These ceremonies ensured that the pharaoh could live on in the afterlife, supported by the devotion of the living. The pyramid was not merely a tomb, but part of a larger complex, a spiritual machine that relied on human belief and care to function. For the workers, the completion brought mixed emotions. Some may have felt pride, others relief, and some a quiet sadness. Their daily routine, the rhythm of hauling, carving, and setting would change. Many would return to their villages, some to farming, others to different kinds of labor. Some may have been called to other construction projects, while a few might have remained to serve in the temples. But all had left a mark on history, even if their names were lost. The sheer scale of the project demanded resources beyond labor. Food, water, tools, and shelter had to be continuously supplied. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands of workers were involved over the years, supported by an even larger network of farmers, artisans, and administrators. This vast mobilization reflected not only the pharaoh's power, but also the organization of society itself. The pyramid was a testament to the ability to direct human effort on a scale rarely matched before or since. Yet, despite its grandeur, the pyramid was also a fragile monument. Time, nature, and human action slowly wore it down. Looters and grave robbers, eager for gold and treasures, broke through walls and corridors. Earthquakes loosened stones. The desert wind sanded edges smooth. Successive rulers sometimes neglected or repurposed its stones for other buildings. What remains today is a shadow of its original glory. Still, the pyramid's endurance through millennia is remarkable. It survived the rise and fall of civilizations, changes in religion, invasions, and centuries of neglect. It has inspired awe, study, and countless myths. People have wondered how it was built, who built it, and why. Modern archaeology has answered many questions but also revealed new mysteries: hidden chambers, precise alignments, and engineering methods still debated. The Great Pyramid stands today not just as a relic of ancient Egypt, but as a symbol of human endeavor. It reminds us that great achievements come from sustained effort, planning, and cooperation. It is a monument not only to a pharaoh, but to the countless unnamed workers whose sweat and skill shape the stones. In the quiet desert, beneath shifting stars, the pyramid waits. Its shape still captures the imagination. Its stones still hold stories, and its presence still commands respect. As night falls and the desert cools, the pyramid remains a testament to the impossible made real through human will. In the centuries that followed the construction of the Great Pyramid, the world around it shifted slowly but profoundly. New dynasties rose and fell, their rulers building temples, statues, and tombs of their own. But none could match the scale or ambition of Khufu's monumental work. The memory of how the pyramid was built faded, replaced by legend, myth, and speculation. The workers' villages fell silent and were eventually buried beneath shifting sands. The elaborate system of food and water supply that had sustained thousands for decades vanished with the people who managed it. Despite this, the pyramid itself endured, standing as a silent guardian over the desert. Travelers from distant lands began to take notice. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote about the pyramids with wonder, mixing observation with tales that were part fact, part fantasy. Later, Roman and Byzantine visitors left graffiti on the stones, names and dates carved to mark their passage, small echoes of their presence in the pyramid's long life. Each visitor saw the monument through the lens of their own culture and understanding, adding layers of interpretation that both obscured and enriched the pyramid's true story. As centuries turned into millennia, the pyramid took on new meanings. It became a symbol of Egypt itself, an emblem on coins, flags, and souvenirs. Its image traveled far beyond the Nile, inspiring architects, artists, and writers across the globe. The mystery of its construction became a source of fascination, fueling theories ranging from ingenious engineering to supernatural intervention. Yet, the core truth remained. It was built by human hands. Through immense labor, determination, and ingenuity. The erosion of the pyramid's outer casing stones over time exposed the rough inner core, revealing the complexity and scale of the construction techniques. Archaeologists today study these layers to better understand the challenges ancient builders faced. They examine tool marks, quarry sites, and ancient pathways, piecing together the immense logistical puzzle. This modern work helps restore the pyramid story from fragments of stone and dust, allowing us to glimpse the human endeavor behind the grandeur. Today, visitors to the Great Pyramid often stand in awe, gazing upward at its massive presence. Many reflect on the sheer will it took to create such a monument, the thousands of lives intertwined with its rise, and the passage of time that has left it both weathered and majestic. The pyramid is a reminder of what humanity can achieve, as well as a meditation on the impermanence of all things. In the quiet desert nights, the pyramid remains a steadfast monument, both a tomb and a testament. It invites us to consider our own place in the flow of time, the marks we leave, and the legacies we build. As stars wheel overhead, and the wind whispers through ancient stones, the Great Pyramid continues to stand silent, vast, and enduring. The surrounding landscape of the Great Pyramid has shifted over the millennia, shaped by both natural forces and human hands. Once the plateau was more isolated, its vast emptiness broken only by the silhouettes of the three main pyramids and scattered smaller tombs. Today, the edges of the sprawling city of Cairo creep closer, with roads, buildings, and the hum of modern life mingling uneasily with the ancient stones. Despite this, the pyramid holds its ground, a timeless sentinel. Amid the flux of civilization, the air near the pyramid carries a unique stillness, a quiet that seems to pause time itself. Visitors who come early in the morning often find the space nearly empty, with only the soft crunch of sand underfoot and the distant call of desert birds breaking the silence. The light at dawn caresses the pyramid's rough surface, casting long, gentle shadows that stretch across the desert floor. In these moments, it is easy to imagine the thousands who once worked here, men and women, carrying stones, carving blocks, singing chants to keep rhythm. The echoes of their efforts, though faint, seem to linger in the dry air. In the history of Egyptology, the Great Pyramid has been a source of endless fascination and study. Early explorers chipped away at the mystery with tools and notebooks, mapping corridors and chambers, attempting to decipher hidden meanings. Later, advances in technology allowed for more subtle investigations. Ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and digital modeling. These modern tools reveal the pyramid as a complex architectural achievement, full of unseen passageways and chambers, each placed with intention and care. Yet, despite all the discoveries, many mysteries remain. The exact methods of construction, the full purpose of certain chambers, and the lives of the workers who built the pyramid still elude complete understanding. The ancient builders left few written records detailing the process, and what they did leave is often fragmentary and symbolic. It falls to modern scholars to piece together the story, using a combination of archaeology, anthropology, and engineering. The scale of the pyramid's construction also speaks to the social and political organization of ancient Egypt. To coordinate such an immense project required not only physical labor, but also careful planning, resource management, and a hierarchical structure capable of mobilizing thousands. The pharaoh, as both ruler and divine figure, embodied this organization. His authority inspired the workers, motivated the state, and ensured the flow of resources. The pyramid was not simply a building. It was the physical manifestation of the state's power and unity. Over time, the symbolism of the pyramid evolved. It became a source of cultural pride and spiritual meaning, representing the connection between earth and sky, mortality and eternity. Its shape, broad at the base and rising to a point, suggested a path for the soul's journey, a ladder between worlds. This spiritual dimension added layers of meaning beyond the physical structure, intertwining belief and stone in a timeless dialogue. Today, the Great Pyramid invites reflection not only on ancient technology but also on human aspiration. It challenges us to consider what we can achieve with determination and cooperation, even in the face of seemingly impossible odds. It reminds us that behind every great monument are countless individuals whose efforts, often unrecorded, made history possible. As the sun sinks low over the desert, casting warm hues across the limestone blocks, the pyramid remains a steadfast, witness to time. Its silhouette fades gently into twilight, a quiet giant resting until the dawn brings new light and new questions. The Great Pyramid's place on the Giza Plateau is not just a matter of geography but of deep symbolic meaning. The choice of location reflects careful consideration by the ancient Egyptians. Situated on the west bank of the Nile, the pyramid aligns with the land of the dead, where the sun sets each day. This westward placement was a deliberate connection to the realm of the afterlife, reinforcing the spiritual purpose of the tomb. Nearby, the Nile's life-giving waters flowed steadily, linking the cycles of death and rebirth that shaped Egyptian belief. In addition to the natural landscape, the pyramid's orientation to the cardinal points demonstrates the builder's precise understanding of astronomy. Its sides align almost perfectly with north, south, east, and west. This alignment was no accident, but a reflection of the importance the Egyptians placed on cosmic order, or mat. The pyramid was meant to embody this harmony between earth and sky, between the mortal realm and the divine. The construction process itself was a marvel of organization. Although the massive stones may seem overwhelming to imagine being moved by hand, the ancient workers had systems and tools that made their work possible. They quarried limestone blocks nearby and transported heavier granite from farther south, some pieces weighing tens of tons. Workers used wooden sledges to drag stones, sometimes wetting the sand ahead to reduce friction. Copper chisels and stone hammers shaped the blocks with remarkable skill. Behind the scenes, a vast support system made this labor possible. Farmers and fishermen provided food. Craftsmen produced tools. Builders created ramps and scaffolding. Coordinators planned schedules, assigned roles, and maintained discipline. This network of effort extended beyond the immediate workers, involving a society mobilized toward a common goal. The pyramid was as much a social project as an architectural one. Life at the construction site was hard and demanding. Workers endured long hours under the hot sun, with only basic shelter and simple meals. Injuries were common, and medical care limited. Yet, archaeological evidence suggests that many workers were cared for and respected, receiving proper burials nearby. This challenges older assumptions of slave labor and hints at a complex society, where skilled laborers contributed to a monumental achievement. The pyramid's design also reflected evolving religious ideas. Inside, narrow passageways and hidden chambers created a spiritual journey for the deceased pharaoh's soul. Air shafts pointed toward specific stars associated with the gods, guiding the spirit's ascent. The internal architecture balanced practical considerations, such as relieving pressure on burial chambers with symbolic meaning. Over time, the Great Pyramid inspired countless other structures across Egypt and beyond. Its influence reached into later dynasties and even into distant cultures fascinated by its form and mystery. The pyramid's image became a symbol of power, eternity, and human ingenuity. In modern times, the pyramid continues to captivate people worldwide. Its presence sparks imagination and wonder, inviting us to reflect on human achievement, the passage of time, and the mysteries that remain. It stands as a silent testament to the ancient builder's vision and perseverance. As dusk settles over the desert, the Great Pyramid remains steadfast, a quiet monument to the dreams and labors of a distant age. Its stones catch the last light of day, glowing softly before night draws its veil once again. The tools used by the ancient Egyptians to carve and shape the stones of the Great Pyramid were surprisingly simple yet effective. Made mostly from copper, the chisels and saws required frequent sharpening, as copper is softer than the limestone and granite they worked on. Despite these limitations, skilled craftsmen used these tools with remarkable precision, creating blocks that fit tightly together without mortar. The joints were so exact that even a thin blade could barely slide between the stones. This craftsmanship speaks to a patience and attention to detail that define the entire project. The massive stones was another monumental challenge. While some stones came from nearby quarries, the hardest granite blocks were hauled from Aswan, hundreds of miles south along the Nile. The journey involved barges floated on the river during the flood season, then overland dragging on sledges and rollers. This process required careful timing with the Nile's annual rise, as well as coordination among dozens of workers to move stones weighing tens of tons. The ramps used to raise stones to higher levels of the pyramid have been the subject of much debate. Archaeologists believe that a combination of straight and spiral ramps was used, constructed from mud brick, limestone chippings, and clay. These ramps had to be rebuilt frequently as the pyramid rose higher. The labor involved in maintaining these ramps was significant, and managing them required foresight and organization. The pyramid's internal chambers present another layer of complexity. The Grand Gallery, a tall, narrow passage leading upward within the structure, is an architectural marvel. Its corbelled walls rise in steps, supporting the immense weight above while guiding visitors deeper into the pyramid. The purpose of this gallery remains partially mysterious, but it highlights the builder's ingenuity in balancing space, weight, and function. The burial chamber itself, made of massive granite blocks, was designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the stone. Above, the relieving chambers built overhead distributed the weight and protected the chamber from collapse. These features show a deep understanding of engineering principles, achieved without modern tools or calculations. Despite the grandeur and effort, the tomb's treasures were likely stolen long ago. Ancient tomb robbers penetrated the pyramid, seeking gold and artifacts. The lack of rich burial goods today suggests that looting occurred early in the pyramid's history, perhaps even within a few decades after its completion. However, the pyramid's true treasure was never gold or jewels, but its enduring form and the legacy of its builders. Their work continues to inspire wonder and admiration, reminding us of the power of human determination and cooperation. As the sun dips below the horizon and the desert cools, the Great Pyramid stands quietly, its stones glowing softly in the fading light. It remains a monument not only to a pharaoh's ambition, but to the countless hands that shaped history stone by stone. The daily rhythm of life for the workers who built the Great Pyramid was both demanding and disciplined. Each morning, before the heat of the desert sun rose high, laborers gathered in organized groups, their tools and sledges prepared for the day's work. Leaders assigned tasks carefully, balancing the workload among teams to ensure steady progress. The chant-like calls of overseers helped maintain a steady pace as stones were hauled, carved and set into place. Water and shade were precious commodities. To protect the workers, simple shelters were constructed from reeds and mats, offering brief respite from the sun. Water carriers moved continuously through the camps, carrying jugs to refresh the parched laborers. The diet was basic but sufficient: flatbread, onions, lentils, and a nourishing, thick beer made from barley. These staples provided the energy needed for the backbreaking labor. Despite the hardships, archaeological findings reveal signs of care for the workers. Graves near the pyramid show that many received proper burials, with some evidence suggesting they were respected members of the workforce rather than enslaved captives. Healed bones indicate that injured laborers were treated, not discarded. This care points to a community bound not only by duty, but also by a shared purpose. The organization extended beyond the workers to the many craftsmen and specialists supporting the project. Stonecutters, toolmakers, architects, scribes, and priests all played their part in the vast enterprise. Their combined efforts formed a complex system capable of transforming raw stone into one of the world's greatest monuments. As the pyramid grew taller, so did the challenges. The ramps became longer and steeper, making the transport of heavy blocks increasingly difficult. Skilled workers climbed to higher levels, positioning stones with care and precision. The risk of accidents rose, but so did the commitment to completing. The pharaoh's eternal resting place. The spiritual significance of the pyramid infused the work with deeper meaning. It was not merely a building but a sacred space designed to secure the pharaoh's immortality. Rituals and prayers accompanied the labor, and protective symbols were inscribed or placed in hidden chambers to safeguard the tomb. The pyramid was a bridge between the earthly and divine realms, crafted stone by stone through human effort and belief. Through seasons of sun and sand, wind and rare rain, the Great Pyramid took shape. Its enduring presence today speaks to the extraordinary combination of human will, skill, and cooperation. As the desert night descends and stars illuminate the sky, the pyramid remains a timeless sentinel watching over the land, holding the echoes of its builders within its silent stones. As centuries passed, the Great Pyramid became not only a tomb, but a source of endless fascination and mystery. Ancient Egyptians, later civilizations, and modern scholars alike pondered its secrets. Its sheer size and precision seemed to defy the tools and knowledge available to its builders. How could such a structure be raised without cranes, concrete, or steel? The answers lay in the dedication and ingenuity of thousands of workers and the meticulous planning by the architects. While the exterior stones have mostly weathered away, revealing the rough core beneath, the pyramid's shape remains unmistakable. It rises above the desert as a testament to human endurance and skill. Its alignment with the stars and cardinal points reflects the ancient Egyptians' profound connection to the cosmos and their desire to harmonize the earthly with the divine. Many myths and legends grew around the pyramid over the millennia. Some claimed it was built by giants or extraterrestrials. Others believed it held secret knowledge or mystical powers. Yet, the real story is far more human, a story of sweat, toil, and the will to create something eternal. It is a story of men and women who worked in the blazing sun, carrying stone after stone, day after day, year after year, driven by faith, duty, or necessity. The pyramid's influence extends beyond Egypt's borders. Its image has inspired countless works of art, literature, and architecture around the world. It symbolizes not only ancient power, but also the universal human yearning to leave a mark on time. This silent monument stands as a reminder that even the most daunting challenges can be overcome with perseverance and unity. In the quiet desert nights, when the wind whispers through the stones and stars wheel overhead, the Great Pyramid endures. It holds within its core the echoes of thousands of lives and the mystery of a civilization long past. Its story is still being uncovered, layer by layer, as each generation brings new tools and perspectives to the ancient stones. As darkness falls, the pyramid stands watch, timeless and serene, a stone poem written across millennia, inviting us to listen closely to the whispers of history. The workers who built the Great Pyramid were not solitary figures. They lived and labored within a community woven tightly by shared effort and common goals. Archaeological discoveries reveal the remains of villages near the construction site. Simple homes made of mud brick, bustling with life. These settlements housed thousands of workers and their families, creating a small city devoted entirely to the pyramid's creation. The daily routines here blended work and rest, labor and social bonds. Within these villages, artisans crafted tools, cooked meals, and cared for the sick. Evidence of medical knowledge, such as treated fractures and dental care, shows that the people valued health despite the hard labor. Children played near the dusty streets, while elders shared stories under the shade of palm trees. Life was harsh, yet it was also rich with the rhythms of community and tradition. The pyramid's construction shaped the landscape and the lives of those around it. Roads were built to connect quarries with the site, and granaries stored the food needed to sustain the workforce. The Nile's seasonal flood dictated the pace of work, with many laborers joining the project during the agricultural off-season. This seasonal rhythm tied the monumental task to the natural cycles of the land. Leadership was vital in managing such a vast enterprise. Foremen and overseers organized teams, kept track of progress, and ensured discipline. Records carved on stone or written on papyrus documented supplies, labor shifts, and worker assignments. This bureaucratic system was essential to keep the project moving forward, balancing the needs of the workforce with the ambitions of the pharaoh. Despite the immense scale, the construction was not just a physical challenge but a spiritual journey. Workers believed they were part of a divine mission, helping to secure the pharaoh's passage to the afterlife. This belief imbued their toil with purpose and meaning, transforming backbreaking labor into an act of devotion. As the pyramid rose, layer by layer, it reshaped not only the landscape but the society around it. It was a symbol of unity and power, a physical manifestation of the civilization's faith and determination. The echoes of that effort remain, etched into the stones and whispered by the desert winds. Night falls softly over the Giza Plateau. The village quiets, stars sparkle overhead, and the Great Pyramid stands eternal and enduring monument to the hands and hearts that built it. The desert winds that sweep across the Giza Plateau have witnessed countless sunrises and sunsets, quietly brushing against the stones of the Great Pyramid. Over thousands of years, these soft winds have worn the surface of the limestone, smoothing some edges and chipping others, slowly transforming the monument's appearance. Yet despite this patient erosion, the pyramid remains a towering presence, a silent witness to the passage of time. The ancient builders understood the challenges of the environment. The intense heat of the sun during the day was tempered by the cold desert nights. Workers had to adapt to these extremes, managing fatigue and discomfort with limited resources. Their simple clothing, often linen tunics or loincloths, offered little protection from the elements, and shade was scarce. Yet they endured, driven by the demands of their task, and the faith that their efforts were part of something greater. The pyramid stones themselves tell a story of natural history. The limestone quarried for the casing and core was formed from ancient seabeds, rich with fossilized marine life. The granite used for inner chambers came from mountainous regions, transported hundreds of miles. Each stone carried with it the weight of geological time, connecting the monument not only to human history, but to the deep history of the earth itself. Inside the pyramid, the air remains still and cool, a stark contrast to the blazing sun outside. Narrow corridors lead to hidden chambers, places once sealed and secret. These spaces were designed with care, their dimensions calculated to support the vast weight above and protect the pharaoh's resting place. The silence here is profound, broken only by the faintest echoes of footsteps or the whisper of a breeze seeping through ancient cracks. Pyramids' alignment with celestial bodies reflects the Egyptians' fascination with the sky. Its sides point toward the four cardinal directions with remarkable accuracy. Some passages align with specific stars or constellations important in their mythology. This cosmic connection reinforced the belief that the pyramid was a bridge between the earthly and divine realms, a ladder for the pharaoh's soul to ascend among the stars. Scientists and archaeologists continue to study the pyramid, uncovering new details with each generation. Advanced technology allows for non-invasive exploration, revealing hidden voids, structural nuances, and clues to ancient construction techniques. Each discovery adds depth to our understanding while preserving the pyramid's mystery. As night deepens over the desert, the Great Pyramid stands enveloped in darkness and moonlight, a steadfast monument to human endeavor, faith, and the inexorable flow of time. Its stones hold countless stories, waiting patiently to be told. As the Great Pyramid stands tall against the vast desert sky, it also marks the end of an era in ancient Egyptian architecture. Following its construction, pharaohs would build smaller pyramids and explore new styles of tombs, such as rock-cut chambers in the Valley of the Kings. Yet the Great Pyramid remains unmatched in scale and ambition, a lasting symbol of a civilization's greatest achievements. The legacy of the pyramid extends beyond its physical form. It influenced religious beliefs, cultural identity, and even the political structure of Egypt for centuries. The monument embodied the pharaoh's divine authority and connection to the gods, reinforcing the social order and inspiring awe among the people. Over time, the pyramid became a focus for travelers, historians, and explorers who sought to understand its secrets. Their journeys brought stories and knowledge back to their own lands, spreading the fame of the pyramid far and wide. Despite the erosion and damage it has suffered, the monument continues to captivate imaginations and draw visitors from around the world. The Great Pyramid also reminds us of the passage of time and the impermanence of human endeavors. Though built to last forever, it has been slowly worn down by wind, sand, and human hands. Yet, in its endurance, it teaches patience, resilience, and the power of collective effort. As twilight fades and stars emerge overhead, the pyramid's silhouette softens against the night sky. It remains a silent guardian of history, its stones whispering stories of ancient toil, faith, and the unyielding human spirit. In this quiet moment, we are reminded that behind every great monument lies a tapestry of human lives, woven together by hope, challenge, and determination. As the last chapter of this story unfolds, we return to the Great Pyramid itself, a timeless monument resting quietly on the Giza Plateau, its stones cooled by the desert night. After centuries of standing watch over the land, it remains a symbol of human perseverance, an emblem of dreams carved in limestone and granite. The pyramid story is one of countless hands and hearts, of sweat and skill, of hope intertwined with hardship. It is the tale of laborers who, without modern tools or machinery, shaped a monument destined to outlast empires and generations. Each stone, carefully cut and placed, speaks of patience and precision, of a society bound together by a shared vision. Though many details of the construction remain cloaked in mystery, what endures is the spirit of human endeavor. The Great Pyramid challenges us to consider what is possible when people work toward a purpose greater than themselves. It reminds us of the quiet strength found in routine, in repetition, in the slow but steady building of something meant to last. Today, as the desert wind whispers softly through the stones and the stars wheel silently overhead, the pyramid stands not just as a relic of the past, but as a living monument to the persistence and creativity of humanity. It invites us to reflect on our own journeys, on the marks we leave, the legacies we build, and the dreams we chase. In this stillness, the Great Pyramid offers a final lesson: that greatness often comes not from sudden triumph, but from steady, enduring effort, from countless small acts done with care and purpose, carried forward through the flow of time. As you drift towards sleep, let the ancient stones remind you of the power of patience and the beauty of persistence. Rest now, as the pyramid rests under the vast, eternal sky, quiet, strong, and timeless.